We take no pride in authorship, and we don't have tribal politics. Our motto is not left, not right, but forward. If you see the Forward Party, what does that mean? You'll have to actually read to see what that candidate supports. Potholes are neither Republican nor Democrat.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Redemption Project. I am Brandon Burley. Today, I've got with me Nick. Nick is the Tennessee Forward Party chair. So we've talked to all the different candidates so far this season, and we know that there's been a lot of different people getting endorsements, and the Forward Party is no different. Nick?
Hi, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for coming. All right. So it's interesting. I have been told that I have a face for radio and a voice for books.
I haven't heard that one before.
So, Nick, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm not that interesting. I can summarize myself pretty quickly. My day job is I'm a law professor at the University of Tennessee, where I teach technology law, property, some constitutional law as well. And I spent a number of years in industry. I was an attorney for Microsoft, an attorney for Amazon. My connection to Tennessee, I'm not a native Tennessean, but I did my JD, my law degree at Vanderbilt, and then returned to take a post at the University of Tennessee. But I think more interesting, perhaps to your readers, is that I am the chair of the Tennessee Forward Party.
So, real quick, we're going to sidetrack for just a minute. So, do you teach in the law school?
Yes.
Okay. And so oh man. So some of my friends have also taught or do teach still at the law school. So let's talk about the Forward Party. What is the Forward Party for those that are unfamiliar with it?
Sure. So the Forward Party is a political party. It's intended to be a major contender. It's intended to challenge the two-party duopoly, that is the Republicans and the Democrats, and their hold on electoral politics. We want to be a viable third party. The history of the United States, or let's say the history of, the last 100 years, has been one in which third parties have really not had any shot. That's for a number of reasons. We have, because of our electoral system, unlike a parliamentary system in Europe, it doesn't really provide the opportunity for third parties to make a lot of headway. So that's partly structural that's prevented it. But it's also, I think, an own goal on the part of these third parties that have come out with what you might call niche platforms. So the Green Party, great. If you have environmental sympathies, then maybe that's your party. But are you going to base your entire vote on that issue? A very small portion of the public is going to do that. You're going to have parties that are, the Libertarian Party, again, that's niche. Democratic Socialists of America. I know there's a lot of fear about that right now, given some of the primary wins, but that's still relatively niche, even if it's getting more news. So I think one of the problems with third parties is that they've not tried to appeal to a broad enough base such that they could attract a meaningful share of the vote. The Forward Party is aiming to do that. We are a centrist political party. We are happy to borrow ideas from the left or the right and to come up with our own. We take no pride in authorship, and we don't have, we eschew tribal politics. Our motto is not left, not right, but forward. Now, does that mean we're solely in the mushy middle on every issue? Just take every issue. Here's the left, here's the right. Okay, where's the exact center? That's our position. No, that's not the right way to think of the Forward Party. The right way to think of the Forward Party is that we occupy kind of the center left to center right. So yeah, we're not going to have anything on the far right or on the far left, but we would support candidates, for example, in the Memphis area, who are left-leaning, who are maybe more traditional Democrats. We would support candidates in Eastern Tennessee, who are more traditional Republicans, not the far right, again, not the far left. So we have candidates of different stripes, and candidates are free to formulate their own platform, and we think that the platform should be largely tailored to the specific regions, but as long as they occupy a reasonable middle area of the spectrum and they subscribe to our broader policies and principles around civility, accountability, opposition to gerrymandering and things like that, we're happy to support them. But we want to be a viable third party that's going to break up the duopoly.
So then let's expand on that for a little bit, and let's avoid the hot button issues, right? So generally speaking, what we see is people want clicks and they want views. And so the first thing they're going to do is they're going to run to Where do you fall on abortion, death penalty, so on and so forth?
Yeah.
What we know is that 95% of politics sits in that middle that has nothing to do with those outer bounds, right?
Exactly.
And so while it might not be as pretty, it is more important that we talk about these other things because that is where the vast majority of issues are, and that's where the vast majority of voters are concerned.
Yes.
That said, what is the forward party's position on pick any topic, right? Is big government, big spending, less government, less spending? Do you guys have a national position on any of these topics, or how do you view that?
Yeah, great question. So I'm gonna get professorial here, and I apologize. I'm gonna bracket this into 4 quadrants or 4 distinctions here. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's do our first pivot. Let's make an important distinction between the national forward party and state forward parties. So in electoral politics, and this is not new with us, this is what you will see with the Republicans, it's what you'll see with the Democrats. There is the National Republican Party, and then there's the Tennessee Republican Party, and the Georgia Republican Party, and the Rhode Island Republican Party. And likewise, you'll have the California Democratic Party and the Texas Democratic Party, etc. Those two are corporately independent. They're distinct legal bodies. They're separately incorporated. There's a lot of coordination and ideally harmony, but they are distinct. And the state parties can chart their own course to a certain extent. So with that distinction in mind, there's a national forward party, and that was formed in 2021 by Andrew Yang, Christine Todd.
In the middle of COVID. That's a good one right there.
Yeah. So Andrew Yang, Christine Todd Whitman, and Michael Wilner formed the National Forward Party. It wasn't called the National Forward Party. It was just called the Forward Party in 2021. And it began building the infrastructure. And it's just amazing that they were able to keep the momentum going. It's not easy to build a full political party, but they've kept it going. They're also the 3 co-chairs right now. And the National Forward Party has, again, let's make another distinction, another pivot point. They have a distinction between what we might call their general platform and their concrete platform. And these are my terms, so you're not going to find those specific categories on the website. But the general principles or the general platform are things like respect for the rule of law and the Constitution, respecting the outcomes of elections, bottom-up governance. We want to empower local leaders to, craft policies that make sense for their communities rather than dictating a top-down policy. Civility, ethics, integrity, compassion. And I can go into any of these. They're not vacuous. They're lofty, but they're not vacuous. And so these are, although they are lofty, although they are broad, we think that they're solely lacking in the 2-party system. We think that, either party is entirely capable of getting on its high horse and criticizing the excesses of the other party. And then once they gain power, turning around doing the exact same things they accuse their opposition of doing. There are no principles to speak of. There are a few principled leaders in the other parties. So we take these principles very seriously. But those are, again, sort of our broad policy platform planks. In terms of concrete planks, at the national party level, there are really only 2. And they're quite simple: voting reform and redistricting. So, voting reform, the background problem is that under the primary system, a candidate with a simple plurality of votes wins, even if most voters disapprove of that candidate. And when we couple that with gerrymandered districts, which we'll talk about in just a moment, that's going to favor extremist candidates who cater to an extremist base. So we support changing electoral systems to support options like ranked choice voting or approval voting. There are a number of different variants there. Some states, some cities have these voting mechanisms. We want more of them. We want perhaps all of them to have them. But that's one of the 2 concrete policy positions we have. The other concrete policy position we have at the national level is against gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is we think a tragic practice where 80% of congressional districts are considered safe for either Republicans or Democrats. And that leads to a re-election rate of over 90%. So you have representatives who are far more worried about being challenged in the primaries than in the general election. And when those same representatives or their state compatriots are in charge of creating the district lines, this creates a situation where the representatives get to choose their voters rather than the voters choosing their representatives. And that is not healthy for a democracy. So we strongly oppose gerrymandering. We support independent, nonpartisan, or bipartisan commissions that would draw district lines under either federal or state law. So that is the national platform. Many different sort of broad principles, only two concrete policy positions. And one of the reasons why it maintains that broad perspective is because it is attempting to appeal to a broad swath, and different states are going to have and are free to have different policies. And I can get into Tennessee's, for example, if you're interested, but I've been talking for a while, so maybe I'll just pause there and let you reflect on any of that if you
That's
want
okay.
to.
I was also taking notes while you were talking because a
Great.
few follow-up questions. So is it fair to say that the Forward Party does not like caucuses? They would prefer a primary or even an open primary?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured as much by the way that you were talking, but I just wanted to make sure that I was on that. And then also,
well, sorry, let me back up. If you're
Sure.
referring to caucuses in terms of the caucus voting method versus a primary method, if that's what you mean by caucuses,
yes.
I don't know if I can speak to that. I don't know if we have a firm policy on that. I think the more pressing commitment that we have is to open primaries and ranked choice voting.
Okay. So then before I go into open primaries and kind of get your feedback on that, what about, you mentioned democracy. So do you see us as a democracy? Do you see us as a republic, a constitutional republic? What does the Forward Party see us as?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding, I don't know, something, I don't find that to be a terribly important distinction. We're both. We're a republic. We're a democracy. We're not a direct democracy. If we were a direct democracy in the true, Athenian sense, we would all vote on the laws, and whichever laws 51% of people voted on would become law. But that's not how any modern nation does it. We are a representative democracy. If you want to call it a republic, that's fine. It is a republic. So when we say we have a commitment to democracy, we're not saying as opposed to a Republican form of government, small r Republican, that is. We say
Right.
that we want a system of governance that respects the popular will of the people. And so there are certain practices and certain structural elements that really defy the popular will of the people, such as the gerrymandering, such as the primary system, and even potentially the electoral college, although that's not something that we take a firm position on.
Okay. So when we move on to open primaries, we have a huge issue that I found in Tennessee, and this is just me from my own research. What I've seen is that voter education is plummeting. It feels like year over year, the more people I talk to, the less that are informed. They are familiar with what the national news media may say, talking points of one side or another. They understand the tribalism and not the nuance. So How do we move past the tribalism and into the nuance so that way they can, if it did become an open primary, my fear would be that, let's say I really want candidate X to win, but I know that candidate Y in their primary is probably got a better chance. Now I need to go get people from the opposing party to come vote on this side so that way candidate X can win, right? They're okay with that because they think once it gets to the general that their candidate can overtake candidate X. How do we avoid that type of behavior in open primaries, or is it something that we embraced?
Yeah, as you and probably many listeners know, Tennessee is a quirky system. It's semi-open, right? Semi-closed. I don't know, slightly ajar. I don't know how you describe it, but you can the day of, say, okay, I want to vote for the Republican Party a primary or in the Democratic Party primary. You don't have to register in advance. We don't have registered parties in Tennessee. But what's a little quirky about it, and I don't know how widespread this is, I suspect it's definitely a minority approach, is you have to, pledge allegiance to and state your true bona fide, under penalty of perjury, commitment and affiliation and fealty to the Republican Party, that you're a bona fide member when you do. Is that constitutional? I think there are, I don't know, arguments that it's not, because if you are a Democrat and you know that whoever wins the Republican primary is going to go on to win the general election, and so you just want to make sure that the least extreme Republican is going to be the Republican nominee because you're a Democrat or you're left-leaning, you're a centrist, you don't identify as Republican, to be required to sort of swear fealty to the Republican Party and say that you're a bona fide member is a little quirky and probably not the right approach, but I guess it's better than a completely closed primary system. But I think I've gone on a tangent from your original question.
No, that's great, because the problem that I hear from many people that want open primaries is, if I do exactly what you just talked about, then I don't get to pick any of my candidates either. It's not, I just get to say, I want to pick a Republican governor, and then I want to vote on the Democratic ticket for Senate, and so on and so forth. You've got to go down the line. So you have to feel really passionate about one candidate, or which one do you feel the most that you really want to address in order to go to the opposite side in the instance that you're speaking of, right?
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to be, so we're using you as the sort of general voter placeholder here.
Yeah.
The voter who's going to do that, the conscientious Democratic voter who's going to go and vote in the Republican primary because they want to choose the less extreme Republican candidate, or we can switch, of course, the parties. You can go to areas where it's predominantly blue, predominantly Democratic, and so you think of the conscientious Republican who wants to vote in the Democratic primary in order to make sure that the least extreme Democrat wins the nomination. To do that, you have to be pretty educated. I mean, you have to know these different candidates and the differences between them. The problem is that in most cases, voters don't know that. They just see a D or an R, and they know which bubble to fill in. There's a tribal element to that. Now, maybe, and pardon again if I'm switching into sort of pitch mode, but one of the things that, because it's an intractable problem, it's very difficult to solve. How, the classic problem of how do you educate voters? I mean, I would love to know the answer to that question, right? How do you, any voter can be educated, right? It's not a question of, it's difficult to actually educate voters if they want to learn. The resources are out there. I mean, even AI can be used if you want to just say, okay, tell me, ChatGPT, these are three candidates, tell me what their policy positions are, where do they fall in the ideological spectrum. There's information to be had. It's not a question of resources. It's a question of apathy. In 2022, only 38.6% of Tennessee's registered voters cast ballots in the midterm election, which is the lowest in a decade. So it's a question of whether folks care enough to show up, and then those who do care enough to do enough research into the specific candidates' positions. It's a very difficult problem, and I don't have a magic solution for it, but I will say structurally, one of the things that the Forward Party aims to do to act as a counterweight to that is to say, look, when you see a candidate on the ballot that says, Joe Smith or Jane Doe as Forward Party in parentheses next to their name, or however it appeals on the ballot, you are not going to know based on that exactly what that candidate's positions are. If you see a D, you know that they're going to be, pro-choice. They're going to have certain views on guns, certain views on the border, perhaps, certain views on the role of government and taxation. If you see an R, you know that they're going to be probably pro-life. They're going to have certain views around guns, taxes, border, etc. If you see the Forward Party, what does that mean? You'll have to actually read to see what that candidate supports, because a candidate on the Forward Party ticket could be center left, could be center right. So that's going to introduce a sort of a measure of non-tribal politics, right? You're going to have to actually know what that candidate supports. I suppose you could, just as a simple heuristic, say, well, I know the Forward Party is probably going to be in the center, so that's good enough for me, and that's good enough for us too. We'll take your vote. We'll take it. But I will say that as a matter of strategy, one of the things that we want to do, not just in Tennessee, but across the country, is if we're in a red district, if there's a race in a red district, we're not going to put up a candidate who is considerably left, we're probably going to put up a center-right candidate, right? Because that is right-leaning enough to appeal to a red district, to voters who don't really like the Republican candidate but don't want to vote for a Democrat. But it's centrist enough that Democrats aren't going to be turned off, and they're going to say, yeah, we'd rather have a center-right representative than a far-right representative. And likewise, in deep blue districts, we're probably going to write a center-left candidate to compete meaningfully. When I initially got involved with the Forward Party, I thought, oh, you guys just want to, like, the sweet spot is those districts that are really closely divided. In fact, those districts hardly exist anymore because of gerrymandering. But even so, the districts that are closely divided, no, that's actually not a great place for the Forward Party to compete because it's potentially swingable in either direction. You can bet the Democrats and Republicans are going to be running hard in those districts to try to win. Whereas if it's a district that is blood red, the Democrats are really not going to be putting up much of a fight there. And in fact, the Democratic candidate is far more likely, or the Democratic Party is far more likely to say, you know what, let's just step out. We know we're not going to win this district. Let's throw our support behind this center-right candidate. Or vice versa, in a deep blue district, maybe the Republican has no shot. The Republican Party might be more likely to pull out their candidate or to encourage that candidate to pull out and throw support behind the Forward Party, just a less extreme center-left or a less extreme center-right. In fact, this happened to an extent. I don't want to oversell what happened, but in Idaho, let me see if I get my facts right. So the Democrat for the U.S. Senate, the Democratic candidate, David Roth, dropped out. And this has now created a one-on-one race between Jim Risch, who is the 83-year-old Republican incumbent, and Todd Achilles, who is an independent candidate supported by Ford. So this is a really interesting race that I'm watching closely. I don't know if the Democrats have actually endorsed the Fordist candidate yet. They might not, but even if they don't, I'm betting a lot of Democrats are going to vote for the Fordist candidate. And this is actually potentially a way to shift a race in a state that Trump won by 36 points.
So then my question would be, how will you, as a party, how do you work when you get into these legislative bodies, right? So there's still even more tribalism once you get in the door. So getting in the door itself is one problem, but once you're in, there's a whole nother problem. And what's the Forward Party's position? And we can say specific to Tennessee if you need, on how do we work together. So let's say that I'm a Forward Party candidate. I have just been elected to the House, and now I want to go there and I want to put up a bill, and I need a co-sponsor, and I need to reach out to people from the Senate. Is this a cross-aisle relationship? What does the Forward Party see themselves as in these situations?
Yeah, great question. So again, I'm going to step back into professorial mode here and make some important distinctions here. We also need to put out some humility here. We're a very nascent political party. We don't have any forwardists in Congress. Okay, but let me make a sort of important distinction here in terms of what a forwardist even looks like, or what it is in terms of how do I put this? Let me say it like this. So there are three ways to be affiliated with the Forward Party. And let me back up even further. The way that political parties work, I mentioned the difference between national parties and state parties. Well, a state party is an incorporated body. It is a legal entity, a nonprofit, but it is a legal entity. And it needs to be a legal entity to get on the ballot. But it needs to be more than just a legal entity to get on the ballot. It has to collect a certain number of signatures before it can even appear on the ballot. So you take a state like, let me think, what's a good example? A state like Utah or Colorado, Minnesota, Florida, the Forward Party there is a fully incorporated entity with ballot access. So when a candidate runs as a forwardist in Florida, you will see on the ballot, Jim Smith, Forward Party, Dave Robinson, Republican Party, Jane Smith, well, I guess they're married, who knows? Jane Smith, a Democratic Party. If you don't have ballot access as a political party, I mean, you and I could start a new political party tomorrow, Brandon. We could call it the, camo wearing hat party, right? Doesn't mean
Redemption
exactly.
Project.
Yeah. We'll call it the redemption party. We could start that tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything unless we get ballot access. And if you don't have ballot access, then you can run as a forwardist in a state, but you're running as an independent. You don't get to have the forward label on the ballot. So one of the things we're working to do is to get more states to have ballot access, more state parties to have ballot access in their states. And that's a huge project. And the parties are making it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that really the best choice given the long runway that you get if they run as an independent, getting to bypass the primaries, right? So getting to move straight to the general election, is it in the forward party's best interest to have a primary like that and to have ballot access where now they are having to compete at that level and it's a shorter runway to know who your final candidate is?
Great question. Great question. Let's disentangle two things here, though. Let's make a distinction between ballot access and a primary process. So ballot access, yes, I think it's an unambiguous yes. It is very helpful to have ballot access. And here's the reason why. If you appear on the ballot as, Joe Dokes, independent, you look like a nobody who just thought it might be fun to run for office. Unless, of course, it's an office that is nonpartisan in which you cannot state your political affiliation. But for Congress, for state legislature, things like that, where you will see a Republican listed and you will see a Democrat listed, if you see then an independent listed on the ballot, you look like an amateur and many people will treat you as an amateur and you're probably not going to win. It's very rare. Now, Lisa Murkowski did win as an independent. We've had independents in Vermont, but those are by far the exceptions. So to have, Joe Dokes forward party on there instantly brands the person, creates an association, builds brand awareness for the party as well, is hugely important. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have ballot access.
So you're saying that legitimizes them as a candidate.
It legitimizes them. Absolutely.
Instead of making them feel like a one-off that didn't have this pull. Okay.
Yeah. So take Lauren Pinkston, for example, who I shouldn't call her our candidate, but I'll use that term anyway, our candidate, right? She's running for Tennessee governor. We think the world of her. We think she's fantastic. She is running as an independent, even though she is endorsed by the Forward Party because we do not yet have ballot access. So that's an example of how we would love to have ballot access to support her differently. So that is distinct, though, from a primary. So let's say we did have ballot access in the state of Tennessee. Like I mentioned, there are a number of state forward parties that do have ballot access at this point. Tennessee does not yet. But let's say we did. How would we then select our candidates to appear on the ballot? It doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion that it would be a primary system. Now,
since we can't do caucuses anymore unless they're grandfathered in?
So this is something that you say to an American set of ears, and their back gets up because it sounds undemocratic. But we used to not have our current primary system. The party leadership used to select the candidates, and they selected them based on competence, based on electability, based on temperament, character, things of that sort. Over time, that got a bad rap. And people talked about smoke-filled rooms, right? All these fat cats sitting in smoke-filled rooms, picking a candidate and foisting that onto the populace. Say, okay, we've picked your Republican candidate. Vote for him or not, but you didn't get to pick him. So Democrat or Republican, or et cetera. So the primary system emerged in the last 50 years plus to let's make this thing even more democratic. Now you get to even choose the nominee for your party. It sounds great. It sounds like more sunshine, more democracy, but it's actually produced some very perverse results because the people who vote in primaries are usually the most extreme and ideological voters, and they tend to pick more extreme candidates. America is actually quite unique, quite distinct in the world, and that most modern democracies do not have the primary system. There's far more of a role for the party to pick the candidate. So once we have ballot access, does that mean we have to have primary system? No, we might. I'm not saying we wouldn't, but I think we try to be very thoughtful and say, is it a primary? Is it the party picks the candidate, or is it some combination of the two? And I don't think it's undemocratic for the party to play a significant role in picking the candidate, because at the end of the day, it's ultimately a general election where democracy plays out. That's where every voter gets to choose. And so I think at the candidate selection stage, it's more important to make sure that we're putting up people who have the character and temperament to be candidates and to be ultimately elected officials.
So if we use the modern example of that happening, if we merge that back into the state of Tennessee, right? So for clarification, how many people have you guys endorsed in the current election?
One.
Oh, only Lauren. Okay.
Yeah, only Lauren.
Okay. So Dr. Pinkston, let's say that she gets a forward next to her name and she gets presented to the voters as selected by the party, and now she's put out there for the general. And she's going up against, if we just say the front runners, right? She's going up against Jerry Green. She's going up against Marsha Blackburn. It's still likely to shake out the same as it is right now. So outside of brand awareness, what is the benefit for the voter to see that name or to see that party name next to her?
More than anything, it's to tell the voters that there's a new sheriff in town, for lack of a better term. There's a new party in town. There's a new alternative to the two-party duopoly. Speaking of, people ask us our policy positions, and we say things like, ethics, integrity, rule of law, respect for the Constitution. It sounds vague, right? It sounds too broad. Yet, if you just say to people, we're going to be a centrist alternative to the two-party system, they're like, that's fine. You had me right there. That is enough. People are so disgusted with the two-party system. There are more independents than there have ever been in just about every state and in the country. I mean, that is the largest party, so to speak. Of course, it's a non-party. So people, even in Tennessee, really want an alternative. That is one of the main benefits to having forward party on the ballot. And I think in the fullness of time, I mean, of course, third parties are very hard to form. I think in the fullness of time, it could be a viable major third party that people flock to.
So to that end, I recently spoke to the chair of the Libertarian Party as well. And they, like you, want more than a two-party system, and they want to be able to let voters have more of a niche understanding of candidates and whatnot. And I don't want to misquote here, and I don't have the transcript in front of me to refer to, but I want to say that they were within a whisker or two of being able to have a big L libertarian on the Knox County ballot coming soon. So have you guys considered that at a county level, running people for a county commission seat or a school board seat or anything like that to start to get your name onto the ballot?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, ballot access is statewide. It's an all or nothing proposition. It's not like you could get a smaller set of signatures to just get on the ballot as a forward party. It's a branded forward party in Knox County, right, or Washington County. You have to collect thousands of signatures to get recognized as a Tennessee recognized political party. So I don't think that provides a sort of incremental path. But there's a lot of wisdom in what you say, though, and that is our approach in trying to, when you talk about trying to be a viable third party, the average consumer, the average political watcher says, "Oh, who are you going to run for president?" The answer is no one. In fact, that would be the stupidest thing to do, is to run as a forwardist presidential candidate where we could act as a spoiler and just all sorts of badness. So then, of course, people think, well, what about Congress? And it's true, there are forwardists running for office. And let me take a little tangent here that I forgot to get to. Even in states where we have ballot access, although there are not that many, there's another way to be affiliated with the forward party, and that is to be forward aligned. So you can be an elected Republican, elected Democrat, and say, I align with the forward party. You're still a Republican, you're still a Democrat, you still caucus with your party, but you are content to have the forwardist aligned label on your bio and to be listed on our website. And so that's another way in which we're trying to grow the party. But to return to the topic at hand, we're not interested in presidential politics. We're not even interested so much in federal politics. That's where a lot of course, the hot button issues are and where the news media concerns itself. We really want to grow the party from the ground up. We want to elect the next dog catcher. No, I know dog catcher is not an elected position in Tennessee, but I'll just use that as a fun placeholder, right? We want to see forwardists on city councils, on school boards, register of deeds, right? I teach property. There's a register of deeds, making sure that when a house is sold, that the title records are accurate. We want to see a forwardist run for that, right? We want to see state representatives as forwardists. And one of the reasons why is because those positions don't need to get mired in hot button issues and national politics. Like, potholes are neither Republican nor Democrat. Let's have really thoughtful, pragmatic leaders who are keyed in on local issues, responsive to local needs, and able to communicate to local audiences. That's how we want to grow the party, really from the bottom up. People contact us all the time and say, okay, I like what you do. I think I want to run. As a forwardist, we say, great, what office? Senator, U.S. Senator. We're like, well, slow down, buddy. If you ever run for anything, outside of maybe class president, in sixth grade, no. So we're not gonna throw candidates out there who are not viable, who are not, serious candidates. We're not gonna say no. We're gonna say, okay, let's talk about register of deeds, right? Let's talk about city council. Let's talk about school board, and let's try to build you up, get you experience, and also show credibility at the local level.
Sure. So to that end, and I know we're nearing on time here, so I'll try and keep it short. But as you are trying to build this, how does the Tennessee Forward Party see itself growing? How does it see its grassroots campaign? I know we kind of talked about that in the smaller offices, but as far as introducing people to what the Forward Party is and what they might be able to expect from that. I'm sure your budget is not the same as the DNC, the RNC.
It's slightly smaller, slightly smaller.
Uh-huh. And how do you spread that word to these voters who, quite frankly, as we discussed, many have apathy for, and the ones that don't, you still have a large segment that are politicized, and the tribalism is so far that no matter what anybody else says, they're just going to attack. How do you avoid that mud, rise above, and get the information to the voters?
Yeah, well, thanks for the easy questions. A few different things here. One, there's always going to be some committed portion of diehard, Republicans, diehard, deep red Republicans who are going to oppose anybody, to the left of King Arthur. So that's going to happen. We're never going to win over those voters, and we have no illusions about that. And they're going to be, far left, or DSA members who are going to have no truck with the Forward Party. So whatever, you can't please all the people all the time. But I think the number of people, even in Tennessee, who hunger for an alternative to the two-party system is vast. I think it's significant. I think it's more than 50%. Let's not say we're going to get over 50%, but I think there is a great hunger for that. One of the ways we can build credibility with both the left and the right is by being neither left nor right. So, for example, we want an array of candidates across the central spectrum. We want to run a center-left candidate in Shelby County. We want to run a center-right candidate in Knox County. We want to show that we are willing to consider issues from both sides. Now, with that, how do we grow the party? It's 7 chickens and 7 eggs, essentially. We need more money, but we need more mind share. We need more volunteers. We need more brand recognition. And how do you grow those things? They're all interdependent. We just want people. Really, we're content at this point to grow the number of people who've signed up for our email list, who want to get updates, get our newsletter. We're content to get more people who chip in $5 or $10 a month. We're content to get more people who want to volunteer. We have plenty of tasks to do and leadership in this party, both at the state level and at the building out sort of 3 mini branches, metro networks, Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. We're going to try to get together for beers, right? Beers and political conversation. And just we want to build community too, right? Let's make it fun. We want people to help lead those smaller organizations. And then we're going to start tabling, at fairs, festivals, schools, libraries, and just informing people that most people don't know that we exist. And when we tell them, we're shocked and they're very interested. So it's about getting out the message. And there's not one dial we can just turn up, to make the car go faster. It's all these interdependent dials. We just have to do them one by one. It's going to be slow. but we hope it'll be eventually exponential.
So how do we avoid, if we are the forward party of Tennessee, and actually I'm going to pause real quick, but
Yeah.
So if you have a candidate that is running for, I don't know, a county commission, right? And there's a hot button issue in the county, and they take a position on said hot button issue that maybe aligns with far right or far left. How does the forward party itself protect itself from that becoming the name and image likeness, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah, very good. So you're saying if it's one of our candidates who starts spouting
Yeah.
some nonsense that's toxic?
Sure. Let me let me just make up something crazy. You've got candidate John Smith, and he's decided
these
that
Smiths are really active in politics.
they're extremely active. And Mr. Smith, he has said that he is pro-abortion, but he is also pro Second Amendment. He wants to give out guns to every single person, whatever, right?
It's a contradiction in terms, yeah.
Yeah, he is I didn't want to pick one side or the other. So he picks something that is generally associated with another party that is a hot button issue, and puts it out as his platform, and he is running as a forward party candidate. How does the forward party protect itself from saying, hold on, this independent candidate, well, not independent, but this is that candidate's position, not the forward party's position?
Yeah, that's again, really good question. So let's make a distinction between controversial issues or controversial issues or controversial positions, and positions that are beyond the pale. So for example, let's use instead of abortion, let's use the border. Let's use immigration, right?
Sure.
So if a candidate running in Knox County said, you know what, I'm really a hardliner on immigration, right? I don't support a path to citizenship for those who've been here illegally. I don't want to, provide. Let me be careful here because we're still working through these policy positions ourselves. But this person said, I'm generally a hardliner on immigration. Let me back up and revise. This person says, I basically want to significantly restrict both illegal and legal immigration. Okay, that's a right-leaning position. It's not beyond the pale. You can make an argument that even legal immigration should be curtailed if you want to make an economic argument around jobs or something. I'm not saying that's my position, but it's not beyond the pale to argue that. I've actually there's Eric Weinstein, for example. He's sort of a libertarian fellow, and he has an argument. I don't know if I buy it, but it's at least thoughtful. But if this person said, you know what, I want to round up every single illegal immigrant in the country, no matter how long they've been here or how lawful they've been or what family ties they have, and just, deport them at the point of the gun. Well, that's beyond the pale. We're not gonna support that candidate. We will withdraw our endorsement. We're not gonna. That's outside the Overton window in our book. Likewise, on the left, you could have someone who says, I'm for a slightly more liberal immigration policy. I think we need to increase immigration. I think we need a path to citizenship. Great. That's a position as well. But if this person says, I want completely open borders, no borders at all. No, that's beyond the pale. So we have an Overton window of sorts. Now, out of those parties' positions could be controversial, but that doesn't mean that we're going to shy away from those candidates. Ideally, we'll have candidates across the spectrum. So if somebody says, hey, forward party, you must be pretty left-leaning because one of your candidates, supports a path to citizenship for people who've been here legally. You must be a leftist. You're just a left-leaning Democratic Party in disguise, right? Democrats in drag or something, right? No. Look, we have this other candidate over here who is more of a restrictionist on immigration. So we want to have a balance. And that's one of the ways that we're going to counter the narrative. No, not everybody's going to be convinced, but that is one of the ways that we're going to establish credibility.
So for the people listening that are just learning about the forward party, and we know Dr. Pinkston, after tonight, she'll know who her candidates are, right?
Yeah.
And see who she's going up against. What should they take away from this? Is at least center to Tennessee, right? This is what the Tennessee Forward Party is trying to achieve. Here is where you can donate money. Here's where we can sign up for the email list. Here is all the feel good information. What would you say to them?
Give me an opportunity to plug the party and tell them where to go to learn more. Sure. I'll take that in a heartbeat. Yeah. Go to forwardparty.com/Tennessee. That will land you on the Tennessee page. We don't have a very sexy website, but it's tied in with the national one. It allows you to sign up for our email list, allows you to establish a donation if that's what you want to do. You don't have to, of course. Or, you can simply email Tennessee@forwardparty.com. That email is going to go straight to me and my leadership team. We're going to read it. We're going to respond to you in person. We're not just going to be an auto response. And if you want, we're going to have a conversation. Do you want to get involved? Do you want to be at the state party leadership? Do you want to be more local? That's how we're going to grow the party. And that's how you can get involved.
That's awesome. And so as what I call myself is a perpetual third party guy, right? So it's a hard life I live some days. But for those that are third party people that want to see the two-party system to not face its demise, but at least be truncated, and maybe we find something that's a little bit better for us as a whole. What is the end game for the Tennessee Forward Party right now? What's the 5-year goal, we'll say?
Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you for giving me a good time horizon.
You're welcome.
It was not to rush it. No, I do appreciate it, because that's a meaningful stretch of time. For 5 years from now, my vision is that we have ballot access, and we have elected officials at various levels of government who are dedicated forwardists. That is what I want to see in 5 years. And so that's in terms of very concrete results. Let me get a little less concrete. I want to see mind share and brand awareness. I want to see that when people are stopped on the street as part of a random polling experiment, for example, this is of course a hypothetical, and they're asked, "Are you familiar with the Forward Party?" That a meaningful percentage of them say, "Oh yeah, of course I've heard of them," just as people will have heard of the Democrats or Republicans. So that is my goal in 5 years.